Lisa's voice barely rose above a whisper, but it hit Jackson like a thunderclap. "I'm sorry. Your card was declined." He blinked once, slowly. The black and gold card in his hand felt heavier than before. This wasn't just a corporate credit card. It was a master key. Access to internal approvals, back-end overrides, the digital heartbeat of every franchise he owned. Declined? That wasn't supposed to happen. He glanced at Lisa, but she avoided his gaze. Her fingers quivered as she withdrew the card and subtly slid it under the register. Behind her, a shadow moved, deliberate, slow. Mark. He stood by the friar, arms folded, his stare anchored to Lisa like a weight. He didn't need to speak. He never did. Authority oozed from his stillness. Jackson offered a thin smile, more out of habit than comfort. "It's all right. I'll pay cash." He slipped a few bills from his wallet and placed them gently on the counter. Lisa's nod was sharp and quick, a silent breath of relief escaping with it. She returned to the screen like a machine returning to protocol. Jackson carried his tray to a corner booth, not glancing around, yet absorbing everything. Every sound, every movement, every absence. Something wasn't simply malfunctioning here. This wasn't neglect. It was sabotage. Intentional. He saw it in the way the trays teetered on the edge of counters, in the way the oil sizzled too sharply, in the way not a single laugh echoed through a room full of customers. The place was busy, but lifeless. He sipped his drink, watching without watching. The silence was thick, unnerving. Years ago, his restaurants pulsed with energy. Music low, workers joking as they prepped meals, managers laughing over headsets. But now, the atmosphere hung like a storm cloud, just before thunder. A burger bag dropped. No one turned. Lisa served another tray with a rehearsed smile that never reached her eyes. Behind her, Mark lingered, still and constant, his presence more prison guard than manager. This wasn't just silence. It was the kind that swells when people are too scared to breathe too loudly. Lisa's movements were precise, but her eyes betrayed her. They glistened, not from fatigue, but from a deeper wound, a kind of quiet desperation. Her hands trembled minutely each time she tapped the order screen. Jackson noticed. He saw the cracks in her armor. The smile she wore was like a mask molded in panic, one that stiffened rather than comforted. When a customer thanked her, it faltered for a second before resetting, like a corrupted software loop. She double-checked orders, then checked them again. She couldn't afford a mistake. Neither could he. Jackson barely blinked. He recognized this kind of silence. It wasn't about discipline. It was survival. He'd seen it before in franchises where managers ruled by fear instead of guidance. A paper cup fell by the drink station, spilling water across the tiles. A young boy, 16 maybe, froze. His hand still hovered over the nozzle. Mark's voice cut through the air like a blade. "If you can't carry a drink, don't bother coming in tomorrow." No yelling, just cold fact. The boy lowered his head, murmured, "I'm sorry," shoulders collapsing inward like armor crumbling. Mark turned away, slow and certain. The echo of his steps felt like ash settling in a ruin. No one looked up, not Lisa, not the cooks, not the guests, not even the boy. But Jackson did. He always did. One mistake, one sentence, and a whole room folded inward. Power wasn't enforced here through authority. It was absorbed through submission. It wasn't loud. It whispered, and it was obeyed. Jackson unfolded his receipt, eyes scanning the timestamp and order number. Then he paused. At the bottom was the printed name of the shift lead. It wasn't Lisa, and it definitely wasn't Mark. He looked up, curiosity sharpening into concern. Lisa was still behind the counter, still repeating the same double-check routine. Mark, arms crossed, stayed in the back like a shadow nailed to the wall. Neither name matched. Jackson folded the receipt, slid it into his wallet with care. No reaction on his face, just a narrowing of the eyes. Details like this don't break systems, they reveal where it's already been fractured. Suddenly, Lisa's tray tilted. She caught it just in time. Barely. It didn't fall, but Mark noticed. His head turned. One glance. Not a word. Lisa dropped her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Mark didn't respond. Didn't have to. Jackson watched fully now. The exchange was microscopic, but its weight filled the room. There were no raised voices, no scoldings, just a glance, and the suffocating silence that followed. He leaned back, murmuring more to himself than anyone else. Fear without a voice, that's not discipline. That's a culture of silence. He tapped his tray, eyes still on Lisa. She wasn't the weakest. She was the one still trying to smile. That mattered. The next day, he returned. Same booth, same menu, different purpose. He approached the counter, ordered quietly, smiled like any regular might. Lisa noticed. Her eyes widened a fraction, then steadied. She didn't speak, but she moved with the same caution, triple-checking every detail. Jackson waited, not for his order, but for the cracks in the silence to finally speak. Jackson wasn't watching the food. His eyes were fixed on something deeper, the unspoken rhythm of the room. He observed the change in tempo each time Mark entered the space. Conversation stopped. Movements sharpened. Smiles vanished. Every action became brisk, rigid, stripped of humanity. Mark didn't need to bark orders. His mere presence reshaped the room like gravity around a black hole. Jackson took his tray, unfolded a napkin, and withdrew a pen from his jacket. He began writing. Quick notes, fragmented observations. One pattern here, one unusual glance there. He glanced at Mark briefly and muttered, almost as a promise to himself, "I'm not just here to eat." Mike was new. 2 days, maybe 3. Still had that anxious energy of someone trying to prove himself. He was wiping trays near the soda machine when Mark passed and pointed a finger toward the back hallway. Restrooms, now. Mike blinked. "I thought I was assigned to register today." Mark didn't pause. "You thought wrong." No one flinched. Not Lisa, not the customers, not even the cooks. Mike hesitated, eyes scanning for guidance, for confirmation. None came. He set the cloth down and vanished into the hallway. Jackson noted it. It was a small disruption, but loaded with meaning. A young worker, newly assigned to a customer-facing role, suddenly rerouted to the dirtiest corner of the store without reason. No explanation, no protest. Because here, questions weren't just discouraged, they were dangerous. Mike reappeared 10 minutes later, sweat clinging to his brow, shirt damp, hands red from scrubbing. Jackson intercepted him by the drink station. "Tough first week?" he asked casually. Mike managed a thin smile. "Yeah, they said it's part of the process, a test." He paused, then leaned in slightly. "But it doesn't feel like training. It feels like punishment." Jackson's eyes stayed steady. Mike's voice cracked a little. "Feels like if they can't break you early, they don't think they can trust you." Jackson looked down at Mike's raw hands. He thought of military hazing, of control disguised as mentorship. He didn't reply immediately, just filed it away. Tests were meant to build. But here, tests seemed designed to crush. Near the break room, Jackson pretended to wait for a drink refill. A clipboard hung beside the door, the weekly shift chart. He studied the grid, rows of names, columns of hours. His gaze stopped on Lisa. Monday, 5 hours. Tuesday, 5 hours. But Jackson had watched her pull full shifts, closer to 8, maybe more. He squinted at the writing. Neat, precise. It wasn't Lisa's handwriting, likely Mark's. He snapped a photo quietly and tucked the phone away. He didn't need proof that something felt wrong. He needed proof that someone made it wrong. In this place, silence didn't hide the truth. It documented it. Bold, clean lines on public paper. Jackson approached the counter holding an empty ketchup packet. Mark was cleaning the prep table. "Busy shift today," Jackson offered casually. Mark didn't glance up. When he did, his gaze was like a scalpel. "Always busy, that's the job." "You run a tight place," Jackson said with a neutral tone. "I run it how it needs to be run," Mark replied flatly. They stared at each other for a breath too long. Mark's eyes didn't show suspicion. They showed recognition. Like he knew Jackson wasn't just a customer. And Jackson didn't care. He drifted back to the hallway, snapped another photo of the shift chart, this one tighter, sharper. Footsteps neared. A young worker, maybe 20, stopped beside him, adjusting his name tag. Without looking, "Up," he murmured. "You should be careful, man." Jackson didn't react. People who ask too many questions, they don't stay on the schedule or anywhere else. And just like that, the kid was gone. Clean, silent, erased. Jackson stared at the chart again. Same names, same numbers. But now they screamed. The silence had grown louder. Someone else had confirmed it. This wasn't oversight. It was design. In the kitchen, every motion was mechanical. Except one. An older man worked near the grill. Broad shoulders, steady hands, calm. His name tag read, Alex. Unlike the others, he didn't shrink when Mark passed. He didn't rush, didn't mask his pace, just worked. Jackson watched him carefully. There was no fear in Alex. Just a steady, purposeful silence. A man who'd seen enough not to flinch anymore, but who hadn't given up either. During a lull, Jackson approached. "Busy day, huh?" Alex nodded. "Always is. You been here long?" "Couple years." His tone was even. Honest. Jackson noticed the way his hands never stopped. Mark passed behind them. Alex didn't change. "You seem calm," Jackson observed. "Being upset doesn't change anything here." The words were flat, not resigned. They held weight. The calm of someone who had learned not to explode because explosions meant exile. Jackson leaned closer. "You ever seen Mark take money from the register?" Alex didn't pause, still slicing pickles. "3 times." Jackson blinked. "You sure?" "Friday night, twice this week. Says it's for balancing, no logs, no receipts." Jackson's pen stopped. "No one's reported it." Alex looked straight at him. "People talk, they disappear, so number no one reports." He returned to his station. The burgers sizzled, but now they sounded different. Jackson stepped away, sat, and pulled out his phone. He opened the voice recorder. Statement from Alex Carter. Witnessed Mark Dawson take cash from the register on 3 occasions. No logs, no documentation. Suspected pattern of intimidation. Silence equals survival. He paused. Ambient noise filled the silence. The fryer's hiss, a beep from the register, soft chatter. Then he labeled the file. Houston Branch Entry 1. He looked toward the hallway. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. That night, in his hotel room, Jackson sat before his laptop. He logged into the executive portal, a system only upper management could access. Search, operational adjustments, southern region, past 6 months. Rows of data spilled onto the screen. Houston wasn't alone. Dallas, San Antonio, Baton Rouge. Same pattern. Low reported revenue. High ingredient usage. Manual wage corrections. All linked to one name, Ronald Vickers. Jackson leaned back, jaw tight, fingers curled around the mouse. It wasn't just one bad manager. It was a network. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a single act of negligence. What Jackson was staring at on his screen was something else entirely, a layered structure, carefully protected, deliberate. He opened a new document and typed 4 words. "This goes beyond Mark." He stared at the blinking cursor, the silence of the room echoing the shift within him. The scale had changed. The stakes had grown. Scrolling through internal reports, Jackson began to see the repeating pattern. Different cities, different managers. But one signature kept rising to the top. Approved by R. Vickers. He narrowed the data, filtered by approver. In seconds, 7 locations lit up. Houston, Dallas, Baton Rouge, Little Rock, Mobile, Shreveport, Austin South. All flagged for irregular payroll entries, silent expense approvals, and suspiciously frequent manual edits. All signed by the same name, Ronald Vickers. Regional Director, respected, untouchable. Jackson whispered the name aloud, like testing the sound of a buried truth. He clicked an archived internal memo. There it was again. Route all final expense approvals through R.V. Vickers, SVP South. The signature format matched. The same initials. Jackson's stomach turned. This wasn't a crack in the system. It was the man designing the blueprints. His printer hummed to life. Pages began sliding out. Shift logs, approval records, payroll discrepancies. One after another, all carrying the same initials, R.V. He moved to the desk, lit only by the amber glow of a lone lamp. The printer kept feeding paper, a whispering testament to months of theft hiding in plain sight. 20 pages, then 30. He laid them out across the desk, arranging them by location, date, and amount. It wasn't just corruption. It was infrastructure built around manipulation. Jackson placed both hands on the table. His shoulders felt heavier than ever. This wasn't a leak. It was a tunnel, dug slowly, reinforced by silence, and now exposed under flickering light. Back at the restaurant, Lisa sat alone at the break room table, her shoulders hunched. A paper cup rested in her hands, the coffee inside long cold, untouched. She didn't look up when Jackson entered. He stood quietly beside her. "I know what Mark's doing," he said, "but I need you to say it." Lisa didn't speak. Her fingers tightened around the cup. The air between them grew dense, like steam rising off hot oil. Thick, invisible, stifling. Still, Jackson waited. No words came, but her expression cracked at the edges. Her eyes glistened. Pain, shame, fear. Then something shifted. A tremble started in her hands. She clutched the cup tighter, anchoring herself. And then, a tear. Quick, quiet, then another. There was no sob, no sound. Just tears, like something breaking gently open inside her. Jackson sat across from her. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Lisa's voice was barely audible. "They always ask what I did wrong. Never if something was wrong." She looked down, then back up, voice cracking. "I thought maybe it was just me." Jackson's silence was heavy with meaning. "Number. It was never you." Then Lisa reached into her apron and pulled out her phone. There was no hesitation now, just quiet certainty. She opened her photos, then turned the screen to him. A picture of the shift board. Her name. Her hours. 8 hours logged, she whispered, but the system only shows 5. She swiped. Another screenshot. Her bank transaction history. Her direct deposit short by $70. Week after week. "Not enough to scream theft," she said, voice steady now, "but enough to make you feel invisible." Jackson leaned closer. The data didn't lie. The timestamps matched. The amounts didn't. "I kept the photos," Lisa added, "just in case one day someone believed me." Jackson looked her in the eyes. "I believe you." And now the evidence did, too. Outside, Jackson dialed his phone, voice sharp, precise. "David, it's me. I need full financial reports from every branch under Ronald Vickers. 6 months, payroll adjustments, expense approvals, internal red flags." There was a pause. "You found something?" David asked. Jackson's jaw tightened. "Not something, a system." He watched the flickering neon of the restaurant sign. Staff passed behind the windows, blurred by time and silence. "This isn't just Houston," he said. "It's coordinated, controlled." David exhaled. "All right, I'll start digging." "Good," Jackson said. "Start with anything that smells like silence." Behind the restaurant, near the loading dock, Alex stood with a cigarette between his fingers. He held out a small USB drive. "I shouldn't have it," he muttered, "but I kept it just in case." Jackson took the drive like it might ignite in his hand. "What's on it?" "Camera feed, 2 weeks ago. Break room register, mostly quiet. But one night Mark stayed late. Opened the drawer. No log, no closeout." Jackson's eyes narrowed. "You saved this?" Alex nodded. "Copied it before the system cleared. I've been careful." For a beat, there was only the wind and the glow of street lamps. Jackson whispered, "You're the reason this won't die in the dark." Alex exhaled smoke slowly. "I'm just tired of watching good people disappear." Jackson clenched the USB drive tight. Now, he didn't just have testimony. He had surveillance. And eyes never forget. That night, in his hotel room, Jackson sat alone. The window blinds let in pulsing streaks of streetlight. He placed his phone on the table, tapped the recorder, and leaned close. His voice was low, composed, yet burning underneath. "If you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it to the press." He paused, swallowed. "My name is Jackson. I founded this company. I've uncovered coordinated theft, wage fraud, and employee intimidation across multiple branches, orchestrated by Ronald Vickers and protected by silence." He tapped the USB drive. "Inside this, video evidence, time cards, names." His voice lowered further. "This story doesn't belong to me anymore, but it will be heard. If I disappear, release this to every news outlet." Jackson's voice trembled, not with fear, but resolve. "Don't wait," he said, pressing stop. "A truth this big deserves daylight, even if I don't live to see it." He saved the audio file with one title, "If I Vanish." In the quiet break room, Jackson slowly removed his cap. His name tag slipped from his pocket, landing softly on the table. Lisa's eyes widened. Alex turned, blinking. "I'm Jackson," he said gently. "The CEO." Lisa's breath hitched. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Alex stared, face unreadable. Jackson stepped closer. "I've walked these floors before," he continued. "I've worn this apron." The moment was heavy. Lisa blinked fast, her throat working to form words. There were no accusations, no cries of betrayal. Only a dawning recognition, deep and wordless. Alex nodded slowly, grounding the moment. Jackson's gaze shifted between them. "This isn't business anymore. It's personal." A silence fell, not tense but raw, vulnerable. Lisa's voice finally surfaced, trembling. "You're the boss? Why come alone? No lawyers, no security?" Jackson looked down, his fingers loosely clasped. "Because I've been where you are." He paused, voice softer now. "Years ago, I wore this apron. I scrubbed grills, ran orders, stayed silent when I should have spoken." Lisa looked at him, brows drawn. "And you let it happen?" He nodded. "I did. I was scared. I told myself it wasn't my place. That silence nearly ruined everything." Her expression shifted. Not judgment, understanding. For the first time, Jackson wasn't a title. He was someone who had been afraid too. Someone who had chosen silence, and now was choosing differently. Back at his hotel, Jackson worked methodically. His laptop was a battlefield now. Files from Lisa, testimony from Alex, the shift charts, and the damning video. He packaged them together, his fingers steady. Subject, urgent, Southern Region financial and HR irregularities. Body, David, attached are verified documents and recordings from multiple branches. Wage manipulation, cash theft, intimidation patterns, coordinated and signed off by Mark Dawson under supervision of Ronald Vickers. Immediate executive review required. He paused, then hit send. The message disappeared into David Langley's inbox, the CFO, the numbers man, the gatekeeper. Jackson exhaled, tension pulling at his ribs. This wasn't about one store anymore. It was about the foundation of the entire company. He dialed a number he hadn't used in over a year. Cassandra, came the voice, cautious. I'm Jackson, he said. I know you flagged discrepancies last year before you were taken off payroll. There was a long silence. Then, finally, if you want to meet, it has to be quiet. No names, no traces. Jackson nodded. We need your help. The truth can't stay buried. Her reply was clear. I'm done losing everything for telling the truth. In a dim corner of a quiet cafe, Cassandra handed him a folded envelope. Jackson opened it slowly. Inside was an email from Ronald Vickers. Subject, labor cost optimization. Message, cut wages, reduce hours. If anyone objects, let them go. No euphemism, no filter, just cold executive decree. Cassandra's voice was calm, yet laced with exhaustion. They tried to erase this. This is the source, the root, the blueprint. Jackson folded the email and slid it into his coat. This wasn't just fraud, it was policy. The next day, Jackson stepped into the pristine corporate headquarters. Ronald Vickers sat behind a polished desk, legs crossed, a slow smirk tugging at his lips. Jackson, he said smoothly. Word is you've been stirring things up. He leaned forward, eyes cold. You know, sometimes leaving things broken is safer for everyone. He tapped the desk. This company runs on balance, on silence, on people who know their place. Jackson held his gaze, unmoving. Ronald smiled wider. It's not personal, it's just business. But be careful where you stick that nose of yours. It was a threat, not a warning. Jackson calmly placed a thick folder on the desk. Rows of spreadsheets, shift records, wage logs, photographic evidence. He traced his finger across them. This, he said, is why the company is bleeding, and why it stops now. Ronald stood, eyes dark. You think you can fix this with files, with numbers? Jackson didn't blink. It's not about fixing it, it's about justice. The air thickened. Two titans locked in silence. Jackson stood, folding the folder carefully. I'm taking this to the press, and to the courts. Ronald's eyes flared. You don't understand what you're risking. Jackson met his fury with quiet resolve. I understand perfectly. A company built on silence doesn't deserve to stand. Ronald's lips curled. Then prepare for war. Jackson nodded. I already have. The next morning, the world erupted. Headlines flooded social media. We serve burgers, but work like slaves. Lisa's tear-streaked photo was everywhere. Beneath it, the name Ronald Vickers. Exposed, unmasked, shares multiplied. Employees whispered, customers demanded answers. Investors shifted in their seats. The company was no longer a kitchen. It was a battlefield. At headquarters, Jackson sat back in his chair as the news played. His phone buzzed. A message. Thank you. For the first time, I feel like the boss is actually listening. He read the words twice. A smile crept across his face. Not triumph. Something quieter. Hope. The war had begun. But Jackson was no longer alone. And that made all the difference. Later, Jackson appeared on screen. His eyes steady. His voice calm. To everyone working at Hale's Burgers, if I've ever stayed silent when I should have spoken, I'm sorry. His voice carried the weight of years. I know silence hurt you. It allowed fear to grow where trust should have been. That ends now. He took a breath. We rebuild. With honesty, with respect, and with one promise, your voice will be heard. Across the country, workers watched. Some cried, others just nodded. This was no longer a CEO behind glass. This was a man breaking his own silence. At a packed meeting, Lisa stood at the front. She wore a new badge, assistant manager. Alex stood beside her, a slide red, leading without fear. He spoke evenly. Real managers don't command, they listen. The staff leaned in. Lisa looked around the room. Faces once filled with doubt now shone with trust. I'm not perfect, she said, but I promise to fight for you. The applause was small, but real. Trust wasn't demanded. It was earned. In his quiet office, Jackson watched a new training video. Employees told their stories. A line flashed. What made me afraid to work wasn't the job. It was the manager. Jackson's eyes softened. This wasn't just a policy change. It was healing, from fear to voice, from silence to strength. The screen faded with one line. Leadership is lifting others, not crushing them. Jackson closed the laptop. The past was no longer his burden. It was his foundation. Later that week, Jackson walked into the Houston branch. His son Ethan beside him. The smell of fries, the warmth of chatter, all familiar, but different. Ethan looked up, wide-eyed. "Dad, I want to clean tables first today." Jackson smiled. "That's the right place to start?" They moved through the store. Workers smiled. Not out of obligation, but pride. The air was lighter. The cycle had turned. What was once fear now felt like home. Jackson sat quietly in a corner booth, watching laughter ripple through the room. He whispered to himself, "Hale's Burgers isn't mine anymore. It belongs to the forgotten, to the brave." He looked toward Lisa and Alex, now mentoring new hires. The future was unfolding. Before he left, Jackson looked into the camera. "If you've ever worked in fear, leave just one dot below, because real change doesn't start with power, it starts with pain." He nodded gently. A quiet promise. And just like that, the story didn't end. It had only begun.